Breaking tonight, we have brand new images of the Manchester bomber. After 3 weeks in Libya, he came back to England just days ago. These pictures are the first that we have seen of the terrorists around that time. They were snapped by surveillance cameras in a mall just days before he loaded up a backpack with explosives miles from his own home and walked into the Ariana Grande concert hall as the music was ending, taking the lives of 22 people. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum, and this is the story. As the details come in, we know that among the dead, 3 girls, aged 8, 15, and 18 years old. 12 children under the age of 16 are in the hospital with very serious injuries. Of the 119 injured, 64 remain in the hospital tonight. And police and nearly 4,000 members of the British military scouring the streets, many in search of the bomb maker who they believe is on the loose tonight somewhere in England. 6 people are now in custody as a result of these raids today. One of them is a woman. We have several big guests for you to add their expertise to this quickly moving story this evening. House Homeland Security Chairman Mike McCall on how ISIS fighters are tracked here in the United States. And former Islamic extremist Majid Nawaz and former Israeli counterterrorism officer Aaron Cohen take us inside the life of Abedi's family and friends and the place that he lives and hails from in England. But we begin tonight with Fox News senior correspondent Rick Leventhal, who is live in Manchester this evening with the breaking developments. Good evening, Rick.
Good evening, Martha. This has been an aggressive and fast-moving investigation resulting in at least 6 arrests here in Manchester and 2 more in Tripoli, Libya, all triggered by the very quick identification of that bombing suspect as 22-year-old Salman Abedi. And as you mentioned, there are new images of him now taken last Friday at a Manchester shopping center where he is seen holding a bag believed to be the one that carried the bomb to the arena on Monday night. He as you said, is believed to have spent 3 weeks in Libya before the attack, before returning to England just days before the attack. Yesterday, Manchester police arrested his older brother, and today in Libya, they arrested his father and also his younger brother, his 18-year-old brother, Hashim Abedi, who Libyan authorities say confessed to knowledge of the plot and said that he and his brother both belong to ISIS. There have been a number of raids here in the Manchester area. One earlier today where 3 people were taken into custody, and then that one tonight that you referenced where a woman was seen being led away in handcuffs, possibly because she might be part of a terror cell related to Abedi. Meanwhile, more than 60 people remain hospitalized, as you mentioned, 20 of them in critical condition with severe injuries. And here in St. Anne's Square tonight, a memorial continues to grow with flowers and candles and signs of support from a community determined to remain united. And Martha, this country now in the critical terror stage, they are very, very concerned here tonight about the possibility that there could be more attacks, in large part because, as you said, the bomb maker is still on the loose.
Rick, thank you very much. Rick Leventhal in Manchester again this evening for us. And Congressman Michael McCall is the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. Obviously, a lot of concerns about our situation here at home as well. Chairman, thank you very much for being here
thank you, Martha.
This evening. Vetting has been something that has been discussed quite a bit, and it raises questions about whether or not extreme vetting, the version that the president has proposed, would help keep us safer here. Your thoughts?
Well, I believe it would. Mayor Giuliani and I worked together to draft a memo on intensifying vetting in high-threat areas, and this is precisely why we did it. Here you have this is not a lone wolf case involving a knife. This is involving a militia foreign fighter type who traveled to Libya, came back to the UK, and then killed so many innocent children and teenagers, my kids' age, at a concert performance. This is a very soft target, very premeditated, sophisticated attack using a very sophisticated explosive device. In the process, I believe he was going back to Libya to provide more training. Ramadan is on Friday, and the president's tour, let's not forget, was just to both the Saudi kingdom, to Israel, and then to visit with the Pope. I think that may have had some bearing on this as well.
Perhaps. One of the things that has come up today is the fact that U.S. officials, according to the reports in the New York Times, leaked some of the information on the detonator, the photos of the backpack all surfaced, and that Theresa May and other British officials are very unhappy. They feel that there were leaks that should never have happened from U.S. intelligence officials. Can you comment on that?
I can. I knew Theresa May when she was what they call Home Secretary. I actually talked to a British official that works closely with her. They are very, I think, upset about the fact, I think, most of all, that the suspect's name was released. Because remember, when that's released, anybody connected, and I think in this case, not being a lone wolf, you have other conspirators involved in a network, a cell, if you will, who are tied to this individual. So once that name is released, then of course the others will either do one of two things: go underground and hide, or try to get out of the country, or will detonate another explosive device very soon thereafter. And so I will tell you, I know firsthand that the Brits are not real happy about that.
Yeah. Just lastly, before I let you go, what has changed here at home as a result of this attack? Because I know there was a hearing today on Capitol Hill. Can people expect to see anything different now?
Yeah, I talked to the New York Police Commissioner. They are, with respect to Yankee, to the games there, to the concerts in the town. Homeland Security is also looking at issuing a joint intelligence bulletin to state and locals about the seriousness of this. I think above all, 10,000 foreign fighters from Europe went into the region, Iraq and Syria. As we squeeze the caliphate, these jihadists will leave, and they already have, into Europe. I think most importantly, we need to stop them from getting in one flight away into the United States.
Thank you very much. Chairman MacCallum, always good to have you with us.
Thank you, Martha.
So brand new video into Fox of the father of the UK terrorist speaking out from Libya, defending his son, claiming that he had nothing to do with the attack. This is Ramadan Abedi, a short time ago, before he was arrested by Libyan authorities. He's now in custody. Watch.
Salman doesn't belong to any organizations, and I know that he doesn't belong to any. There was nothing hidden because I had open discussions with him about anything he wanted to understand.
Majid Nawaz is a former Islamic extremist and author of Radical: My Journey Out of Islamist Extremism. And Aaron Cohen, former member of an Israeli Special Forces unit and founder of IMS Security, a firm specializing in counter-terrorist training. Gentlemen, great to have both of you with us this evening. Majid, let me start with you. As you listen to the father there, what goes through your mind?
Well, what goes through my mind is this is a typical pattern that, of course, there's a level of denial, not just in the immediate family, but in the wider community. The truth is that those of his relatives and close friends who knew this man, this jihadist terrorist, would have seen the signs a long, long way off. The signs don't necessarily have to be that he's confessing to them exactly where and when he's planning an attack, but the signs of radicalization are quite obvious, and they involve a change not only in behavior but in psychology, an insistence, for example, that Western democracy is corrupt, that we must aspire to establish a caliphate, a very literalist take on the religion of Islam. I doubt very much that his father didn't sense any of this. In fact, I wonder how much of these ideas of the need for a modern-day theocracy in the name of Islam that his father even rejects in the first place. I think these ideas are more spread within the Muslim communities than we're comfortable admitting.
We have one picture of Moss Side in Manchester. It's, boarded up buildings. It's not a great picture of the block, and I've seen pictures of that whole area. There have been 16 people who've been arrested in that area connected to terror attacks just over the last several years. What can you tell us about the neighborhood, about the climate there, about life there that might give us some insight into all this?
It's typical of areas not only across other cities in the UK, but across Europe. For decades now, we have allowed a situation to develop where Muslim communities are growing up together apart from mainstream society. We're not as integrated as we should be in these societies, and mainstream society has also been somewhat negligent in attempting to have us integrate into these societies. And the simple truth is, Martha, ISIS didn't, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but ISIS did not radicalize the 6,000 European born and raised Muslims who went to join them. ISIS didn't radicalize any of them. ISIS merely plucked the low-hanging fruit. The sad truth, the scary truth, is that European Muslims have been radicalized for decades by Islamist organizations who have been working on the right side of the law within our communities, preaching theocratic ideals. And so these people are already primed and wanting a caliphate. Along came ISIS and claimed they'd established a caliphate. And as I said, it was merely plucking the low-hanging fruit.
Thank you. Let me get to Aaron Cohen. Aaron, there were stories coming out shortly after what happened in Manchester, being very concerned that there might be hate crimes against Muslims. There was a woman who asked for, white men or Western men, I think is the way she phrased it, to watch out for their wives and their children. That was determined to be hate speech. In Israel, there's a very different perspective on how to handle this problem. What do you think needs to be done?
Well, Israel has Israeli citizens from all facets of life. Israel is one of the most open countries probably in the world. They have Christians, they have Muslims, they have Jews, they have Baha'i. And the way we deal with things in Israel when it comes to these types of, when it comes to terrorism directly and these types of hate crimes, we don't see so much of it in Israel. Obviously, there's a divide with the Palestinian community, and the security measures are very strict because of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and terror organizations who are literally trying to jump over this wall and kill Israelis. But for the most part, the Israelis who are Muslim within the Israeli communities move and come and go very freely. Nazareth, or Nazareth in Hebrew, is a primarily Muslim city, a very holy city inside of Israel, as is East Jerusalem and parts of the West Bank that cross into Israel. There just isn't a lot of anti-Semitism. The Muslims integrate and have integrated very well.
But you say that political correctness is not a factor. It's not something that people are hung up on in Israel.
It's not a factor because the 1 million plus Muslims who live in Israel are also afraid of terrorists. Fahim, which is a very large Arab village inside of Israel, not far from Haifa, is also afraid of terrorists. They want the security measures that the Israelis provide. The Arabs inside of Israel know that terrorists are Islamists and that they're extremists and that they're willing to blow up children like we saw in Manchester.
And they have become so used to living in that kind of society, and I think now we're all living in that kind of society in Europe and the United States.
And we have Arabs who serve in the Israeli defense forces. We have Arabs who are part of our security apparatus. That's part of life there. So nobody deals with any kind of nonsense when it comes to that.
Aaron and Majid, thank you very much. I hope you'll come back soon. Good to see you both. So still ahead tonight, the president was at the Vatican to meet the Pope earlier today, but it might be his visit to Brussels that turns out to be the most earth-shattering part of this whole trip. Ahead on a major NATO meeting, see what one publication is saying about President Trump and what he's done in days that President Obama wasn't able to do in years. Bill Bennett explains. Plus, President Trump's budget director was on Capitol Hill today defending the president's plan to put some popular social programs on the chopping block. Some Democrats even calling the plan hateful. Chris Stirewalt standing by on the battle over the budget when we come back.
We are not going to kick any deserving person off of any meaningful program. We want to help people just as much as you do.
So today, the White House budget chief went to Capitol Hill to make his case in a way that you rarely hear justification for spending in this country. Mick Mulvaney has an entirely different approach that is somewhat more like how folks go about it at home or in their business. How much does this cost? Is this expenditure getting us closer to our goal? And can we afford it? Watch.
This is a budget that was written from the perspective of the people who actually pay for the government. And we went line by line through what this government does and asked ourselves, can we justify this to the folks who are actually paying for it? We no longer want to measure compassion by the number of programs that we have or the number of people that are on those programs. We want to measure compassion, true compassion, by the number of people we help to get off of those programs.
Wow, that's a novel idea, right? But it is not going over very well in some corners. Watch.
You and I have seen a lot of budgets from Democratic and Republican presidents. I've never seen anything as hateful and abominable as this.
It is shameful It is immoral. It is indecent. So this is a picture of who they are.
Wow. Chris Direwalt joins us now with, he's our Fox News political editor. You know, a lot of people, Chris, think that the way that Mulvaney is talking, where he talks about taxpayers, you know, he wants to say to them, is this a good way to spend your money? Are you okay with this? Is this program a big, you know, sort of bloated mess, or is it something that works? Why is that such a hard idea to swallow?
Well, apparently based on the response, I love the fact that in Washington now, this is such a stupid time to be alive. It's just astonishing. The degree of just the vapidity of the conversation. And you have, this is immoral, this is sin, this is terrible.
It's such a knee-jerk, right? They all just get right on the same page. Like, oh yeah, this is script B.
But seriously, what is going to be left for outrage? We have exhausted our outrage glands to the point that our endocrine system is breaking down. We cannot sustain this level of outrage if everything's an 11, if everything is a freakout. For goodness sakes. Now, I will say that for the Republicans, as they look at Medicaid in particular, and Mulvaney is very gifted at this. This is he's the right guy for this moment, for this job, for this budget. His career has been leading up to this point. But these Republicans need to think long and hard as they address Medicaid, which is basically a welfare program. It's health insurance originally health insurance for poor people, now for the working poor too under Obamacare. As they think about making changes to Medicaid, there is huge political exposure there. That is a program that is very popular and is favorably viewed by most Americans. That's a danger zone.
Here's the big problem, as I see it. Social Security and Medicare are not up for any form of reform. I think if you ask most people, does it make sense to do some means testing? Does it make sense to try to save this program so that people, you know, under a certain age might do it differently and they might actually have it by the time they hit 65? It is off the table. The president has said he won't discuss it.
And once you accept, and that's really the problem. That's where Mulvaney falls short. That's where Paul Ryan's going to fall short, which is if you can't deal with the big thing, if you can't do the big thing, why are you bothering being mean in the small thing?
Yeah,
if your budget's blown up anyway and you're going to have all this debt and you're going to do all these things because you won't address entitlements, why not go ahead and give a little? It's like when I go off my diet and eat carbs, you know that there's a donut right around the corner because once I've decided to have a box of Cracker Jack, I might as well go for it.
You're going for the donut. You're not doing the sweet potato. My friend.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. Great to see you as always. So fresh off of his visit with His Holiness earlier, the president touching down in Brussels late today for a very important showdown with NATO members. He once called this whole organization obsolete, remember? Apparently now swayed by the president's tough talk, McClatchy writes this today, quote, Trump has done what Obama didn't, scare NATO into tracking defense spending. Here now, Bill Bennett, host of the Bill Bennett podcast and the former Education Secretary for the United States and a Fox News contributor. Bill, always good to see you. Good evening to you.
Thank you.
It was quite stunning reading the articles on this today and the acceptance that NATO is a little bit nervous that Donald Trump is coming to town. They've rolled out their own red carpet for him, and they want to make sure they can impress him with the numbers that they're willing to produce from each country. Big turn of events.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The question is, will he be received as well in Europe, in Brussels, as he was in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia? He may not be very, very warm welcome. I don't want him to do a sword dance in Brussels. Wasn't crazy about it in Riyadh either. But yeah, and he does seem to have brought them to the edge here of doing the right thing. I think Russia has also helped. By the way, Martha, let's note the irony there. Russia, which is supposed to be this close bosom buddy of Donald Trump, is NATO's sworn enemy. That's why NATO was established, to keep Russia in its bounds. Now Trump is pressuring the NATO countries to ante up more for their common defense. So if he gets this done, this will be an enormous accomplishment. Not the greatest accomplishment. I think the greatest accomplishment so far is that unified Middle Eastern front against Iran. That is a sea change from Obama and very important, but this is important too.
Yeah, you make an excellent point as usual, Bill Bennett, and that is that NATO's reason for being is to protect those countries essentially from Russia. And you've got Poland and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania all concerned that Russia may be looking at, bringing them back into the warm embrace of the Soviet Union. This program is designed to prevent that from happening. So if Donald Trump is strengthening NATO, he is doing exactly the opposite of cozying up with Russia.
Exactly, yeah. And the Poles, of course, are doing more than what is expected of them, as they usually do. Greatest people in the world after the Americans, the Poles. Always take it on the chin whenever there's a war, but they are wonderful people. But he's getting these others, embarrassing them into it. Countries like Germany and so on. One of the officials today NATO officials said, well, we're not going to use NATO to defend or fight ISIS. And Trump will challenge that as well. Secretary Tillerson did, and he's absolutely right. This is a mortal threat, in case they hadn't noticed, in Manchester, at the throat of all of Europe. And in Brussels,
they do that? You know, how can they deny their responsibility when their credo is that an attack on one is an attack on all? So how does NATO say, well, we're happy to pitch in what we're supposed to pitch in, but we're not going to look at this as sort of a global threat, such as it is?
I don't know, but they have lost so much ground in Europe. The things that made Europe so great, the belief in the religious faith, the belief in capitalism, the kind of nationalistic thrust that these countries had, they have lost an awful lot of ground. So we'll see. But ISIS is aimed at them. Let's hope we just don't get this indifference or this reluctance or this sense of resignation. Well, they're here, and it's going to happen occasionally, and there's not much we can do about it.
Like
the heck with that.
Yeah, the heck with that is right. Bill Bennett, as always, good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martha.
So we have no new FBI director yet, if you haven't noticed, and now a longtime friend of Jim Comey's is speaking out quite forcefully why he says the president should be very scared of what Jim Comey is going to say. So is that friend right, or is he bluffing? We'll talk about that. Shocking revelations tonight also as the Obama White House was scolded by the FISA court for overstepping their bounds right at the end of the Obama administration, doing illegal searches for some time on American citizens. This is a very big story. We will lay it out for you tonight. Karl Rove and Juan Williams coming up next.
And the way to make government accountable is make it transparent so that the American people can know exactly what decisions are being made, how they're being made, and whether their interests are being well served.
Alarming evidence tonight that the NSA under President Obama illegally gathered the phone calls and emails and personal information of countless American citizens, violating their constitutionally protected privacy over the course of the majority of his presidency, as it was reported today. This is former CIA Director John Brennan, who served under President Obama, just told Congress under oath this yesterday.
There is, I think, a right of all Americans to privacy, and that sometimes information is collected about U.S. persons who may or may not be involved in any manner of criminal activity. The intelligence community goes to great lengths to cover the identities of U.S. persons if they happen to be included in an intelligence collection.
So here with more is our chief Washington correspondent who has been digging into this big story today, James Rosen. Good evening, James.
Martha, good evening to you. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, known as the FISA court, is so secretive we have no pictures of it to show you. It approves 99% of the government's request to conduct surveillance on American citizens. Now, declassified documents first obtained by the news website Circa show that the FISA court sharply rebuked the Obama administration when its lawyers quietly informed the court 2 weeks before Election Day that the National Security Agency had systematically violated countless Americans' rights over a period of years. Specifically, the court found NSA had not complied with so-called minimization procedures, meaning the measures the government is supposed to take to keep to a minimum its infringements on Americans' constitutional rights under the Fourth Amendment against unreasonable searches. With greater frequency than previously disclosed to the court, NSA analysts had used U.S. person identifiers to query the results of Internet upstream collection, even though NSA's Section 702 minimization procedures prohibited such queries. The judges added sternly, this is a very serious Fourth Amendment issue.
If we can determine this to be true, this is an amazing abuse of power, and it dwarfs any of the other sort of made-up stuff that we're looking into now. We're talking about millions and millions of phone calls and emails that are being gathered up and then being searched with no sort of control over the privacy of the American.
A spokesman for former President Obama did not respond to our request for comment. The section of the law that permits the NSA to engage in this kind of collection, and which it violated so routinely, is up for reauthorization by the Congress at year's end, Martha.
What a story. James, thank you very much. So here now with more, Karl Rove, Fox News political contributor and former Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, and Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five. James lays it out very well. But the bottom line is that a couple of weeks before the Obama team left the White House, they sort of dumped this apology of sorts and said, oh, by the way, we were, breaching all of these rules over the course of most of the presidency. And we were exposing people on upstream, which means, you just went on the internet and you query something or you send something to somebody, not collected as part of any sort of international collection process. They went after it and got it, Karl. So what do you say?
Well, first of all, the administration, you're right, fessed up in October of last year that the new rules that it had put in place since 2011 were not being honored. Now, we need to be a little bit careful in how we look at this because, with all due respect to Senator Paul, he got it wrong. This is not telephone calls. This is something that goes along an internet backbone provider, a carrier, in which a so-called MCT takes place, multiple communications transaction. So think of it this way. There's a great amount of information flowing out there, and some American citizen who's not a subject of either a FISA court order or another kind of court order that allows them to be surveilled, somehow talks about or has terms in their emails that have something to do with that greater subject that they're already looking at and looking at legally. So it's incidental contact. The court held in a very long opinion that they weren't living up to their rights because they weren't living up to their obligations because they didn't have the technology. They had to make a human decision to avoid touching that person's communications. So they were doing it sloppy, and they fessed up, but they fessed up 5 years after these new rules went into place that the administration itself had imposed on itself. And yeah, it's troubling that this went on for as long as it did, and as often as it did, even though in the total amount of information they collected, it was a small amount, but it's problematic. They weren't living up to their own standards.
Juan, what do you think?
Well, I think, by the way, Karl just gave a really wonderful description of what it is, because this is about collecting information as it's flowing in and out of the country at times, and they're looking to connect the dots. People who may be in contact with a terrorist suspect or somebody, and then they're looking to see, well, who else are they in contact with as that data goes in and out. But look, every American wants to be protected against terrorism, and especially if you're in their White House. I imagine Karl must have felt this pressure in his days in the White House. And the intelligence communities know they're being measured on whether or not they prevent the next terror attack. They see this as a tool. They go to the FISA court. The FISA court says, you guys have to be careful. The Constitution protects our privacy, our rights of free expression. You can't do this. And you get a lot of people on the left, like Senator Paul, a libertarian, the ACLU, the Nation magazine, saying, hey, this is government run amok. But in fact, government is trying to protect us. And so at what point do they go overboard?
So here's the problem. I mean, how much of this was for political reasons, Karl, is one of the questions that is raised here. And how much of it was for terrorism? Because we all know that, unfortunately, people like the Tsarnaev brothers in Boston had all the privacy they needed. They had every reason to be caught up in something like this, and yet they weren't. So who was, and especially towards the end of the Obama administration, how much of this was politically driven and not terrorism driven, Karl?
Yeah. Well, I would have to say this. I think we got to be very careful. I wouldn't trust the Obama White House, particularly in 2016, but I do tend to trust the National Security Agency. They got sloppy here. They self-reported this. They identified the weakness in their systems. way too late, in my opinion, but they were the ones who said we are collecting the incidental contact. And look, it wasn't that we were surveilling. If bad guy abroad emailed somebody inside the United States, that's not the kind of contact we're talking about here. They're not really clear in the opinion as to what it is, and I don't want to really have them be clear to us about it, because I want them to protect the sources and means by which they collect this information. But what it looks like is that somebody inside the United States was talking about in an email communication or searching somehow for information about something that was connected to something bad abroad. Like maybe it was, oh well, how do you make a bomb? Right. But they were just looking at it. They weren't self-radicalized. There wasn't some connection between a bad guy over there, bad guy,
I remember
bad guy here.
Jim Clapper in testimony saying, well, maybe unwittingly, perhaps we collected it. So I think this goes all the way back to that.
He was shown then. People criticized him and said that he had misled the Congress. But the point here, to your question, Martha, is there's no evidence that this is politically driven.
Well, that's what we need to know, though. And hopefully we're going to find the answer to that. Carl, thank you. Juan, thank you.
And Congress will find that out, that's for sure.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Juan. See you guys next time. So you remember when the Pope and the president, who was then a candidate, were in a bit of a Twitter war? So how did it go when they met at the Vatican? And what exactly did the Pope say that got the president's attention today, which he pointed out? We'll show you when we come back. Plus, we haven't heard from Jim Comey yet, but is he sending messages through a friend? We will explain. Mercedes Schlapp and Mo Alithi react ahead. There is a bit of a shakeup in the search for the new FBI director. A senior White House source tells Fox News that former Senator Joe Lieberman, who is someone who was considered to be the leading candidate, the president even said he was at the top of the list, is now suddenly out of the running. This is a friend of the former FBI director James Comey is speaking out on the Comey-Trump relationship. His big scoop? Suggesting the president should be scared. His reasoning? Not evidence of collusion with the Russians, not obstruction of justice, but this.
He did not regard the people in the Trump White House as honorable?
That's correct.
He said that? That's your recollection is that he had said that? Or felt that?
I have no doubt that he regarded the group of people around the president as dishonorable.
So there you go. Mercedes Schlapp is a former spokesperson for President George W. Bush. Mo Alithi is a former Democratic National Committee spokesman, and both are Fox News contributors. So, Mercedes, let me start with you. What do you make of that?
Well, I just think it's this moral high horse that Comey and his surrogates like to put out in display. I mean, it's not the first time that we've seen James Comey and come out and basically create this political drama. You're going to see this probably in the next Senate Intelligence Committee where he will be testifying publicly. His surrogates also have been part of the ability to leak out information on what were in his memos. Of course, it's a memo specifically to Donald Trump and not the other ones. This is about James Comey trying to salvage his reputation despite the fact that he's had significant high-profile missteps, being criticized by both parties, Democrats, Republicans, who have basically said that he should be gone, that he should be fired. So I think that this is nothing new. This is a political game that they're playing. This is to try to to protect James Comey and to try to destroy President Trump.
All right. I want to play another piece of this interview that goes to the question of what the president's intention may have been when he said, can we let this go? Mike Flynn is not a bad guy, something along those lines. Can we let this go? Watch this exchange.
The president's people have said he's a kind of a transactional person, that he's, in business, he's schmoozing, backslapping, and that it's just an attempt to kind of make the relationship more personal or friendly.
So I think it's perfectly possible to read it that way. And I'm not even going to say that's the wrong way to read it. It's not the way Comey read it.
I found that to be the most interesting part of that back and forth. Mo, what did you think?
It's interesting, right? Because if you look just at that one moment, the moment where, did the president say that, was he trying to push him? Was that, I don't know, right? Maybe you could just see that as him trying to chum up Comey a little bit. And does that rise to the level of obstruction? I don't know. I think where the president is finding some challenge, or where the special prosecutor is going to have to really dig in here, is when you take all of these different moments and string them together. When the president did that to Comey, we know that was inappropriate, maybe not illegal.
Do you think that any other presidents in the past have ever said to an FBI director or to someone at the Department of Justice, for example, can you see your way past this? Is this something we have to do or not?
I don't know, but what I do
Doesn't it seem logical that they probably did?
Maybe they did, but it's that next step, firing Comey, right? It's that next step where he urged, or even before firing Comey, where he urged Coates and others to go out on the record and speak out against the investigation. When you string all those together, that's where it's creating
Which Coates
this
denied
image.
that.
Mercedes, go ahead.
Coates denied that, Mo, and I think that the way you should listen to yourself, Mo, you're almost jumping to the fact that, well, let's string this together and it's going to become an obstruction of justice. Look, here's the deal. What in that conversation alone, when you talk to legal experts, they basically say that there was no intent. When you look at it just based on what you're seeing, even the New York Times had an opinion piece on it saying that's not obstruction of justice. This is why you have the special prosecutor. This is why the special counsel and the Democrats should be very pleased about this. We're let them figure this out. But the fact is when you have political pundits making that jump, and also now we have Comey where he's, where you have his associates, his surrogates coming out and being public in these interviews. I find that to be quite disturbing for them to go out and be talking to CNN and trying to, make these assumptions and having these conversations. It's almost like if Comey's putting these guys out there.
Yeah, it's a good point. Is that going to have a reflection or an impact on the outcome of this? And people are listening to this. Basically, you've got a jury trial that's going to happen, essentially, and it could be tainting what people think to some extent out there in the American public. Thank you both, Mo and Mercedes. Good to have you here today.
Thanks.
So President Trump made the Vatican today's major stop on his tour that we've been watching. So we're two of the world's most influential people able to forgive and forget. Pastor Robert Jeffress is one of President Trump's faith advisors, and he takes us inside the president's thinking on this historic meeting when we come back. There was a very important moment this morning, a meeting that might have seemed impossible just last year. Went off without a hitch today. President Trump visited the Pope at the Vatican today. So moved by this visit, he tweeted this message, quote, "Honor of a lifetime to meet His Holiness Pope Francis. I leave the Vatican more determined than ever to pursue peace in our world." Joining me now, Pastor Robert Jeffress has advised President Trump on matters of faith, and he is also a Fox News contributor. Pastor, good to have you with us this evening. Thank you for being here. Take us back to the moment along the campaign trail when the Pope was criticizing President Trump, now President Trump, about people who build walls and what that all was like.
Look, this could have been a very awkward meeting when you consider what has been said by each man over the last year and a half. I mean, the Pope fired the first shot questioning Trump's Christianity because of his proposal to build a wall. He then compared the president's populism to Nazism. The president responded by calling the Pope's words disgraceful. But today, the president and the Pope decided to turn the other cheek. And when they emerged from that room, they looked like BFFs. And I really believe that was the right choice and the wise choice for both of these leaders.
So how do you think it went in there? Because you have seen this president, working religious leaders, to put it crassly, I guess, to some extent. But you've seen him do that. How does he do that?
Oh, it's an amazing thing to watch. I remember moderating a meeting between President Trump during the campaign and some never-Trump religious leaders, and they were all ready before the president came in to give him a piece of their mind. And by the time he came in, he listened politely to everyone. He didn't look at his watch once, and once he had listened to them, he explained his point of view. And at the end of the meeting, Martha, he had them eating out of his hand. And I'm sure today that the president was very disarming and listening to what the Pope said. But remember, the Pope is also a political animal, as he described himself, and he knew exactly how to disarm the president. So you had two pros at work here today.
Well, apparently, President Trump told the Pope on the way out the door that I will never forget what you said. And we're hoping to
Yes.
find out exactly what it was the Pope shared with him that made such an impression on President Trump. I want to skip over to this issue of the budget and Mick Mulvaney today, because there's a question of compassion and social programs out there. Let me play this for you, and I want to get your thoughts on it.
Okay. We don't want to measure our commitment to the country by the amount of money that we spend, but instead on the number of people that we help get off of these programs and get back in charge of their own lives.
Just have time for a quick response. A few seconds, sir.
Well, I think the president is going to be balanced. Remember back in the health care debate, he said he does not want to see people dying in the streets. He's not your typical Republican, and I think the president will end up doing the right and compassionate thing.
Pastor Jeffers, thank you very much. Good to see you as always. Coming up next, our quote of the night from Manchester, England. Before we leave you tonight, we want to show you some of those that we lost on Monday night in Manchester. The world will move on in time. These families have a much longer road ahead, so keep them in mind. Among those killed, 14-year-old Nell Jones. In a statement, her school called her a very bright and popular student. Her classmates say that they have lost a sister. Then there's Michelle Kiss. Relatives say family was her life. Just hours before her death, she posted a sweet image of her daughter ready for the concert. Her daughter, Millie Kiss, was pictured in the arms of a police officer. This image has touched the hearts of millions around the globe. Kelly Brewster died after using her own body to shield her niece from the blast. Marcin and Angelica Cleese, both killed while waiting to pick up their two daughters from the concert. Olivia Campbell was 15. Her mom writes that she was taken far too soon. Go sing with the angels and keep smiling. Mommy loves you so much. That's the story tonight. Tucker Carlson's next.